I'm still probably an expert in sort of 10% of what's happening because there is just too much stuff out there.
Luke, thank you for joining me today on the Go with Manav. For those that do not know you, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Luke Alexander. I work at the marketing media and communications agency called 4Agency, and I'm the Chief Digital and AI Officer. And I think we'll talk a little bit about what that means because it's kind of a weird title as we go through. But essentially, I spend a lot of my day-to-day time looking at how AI will transform marketing services for us and for our clients.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Luke. Now, usually with my podcast guests, I like to go back in time to learn a bit more about them to where they are today. So could you please tell us what were you doing at age 18?
At age 18, I just made a sort of big decision. I was finishing school in South London, and I decided not to go to university and do computer science, but to do classics instead. So I'd sort of been really into sort of tech and computers in my sort of teenage years. Then a friend came along and said, "Oh, you don't want to do computer science, you can't be creative there." So my other passion, which was classics, so Latin and Greek and philosophy and history and things like that. So I went off and did that as well. So I was sort of getting into that. So I just done a little bit of freelance work on my first website, freelance work with a friend as well. So it was a fun time.
What made you want to pursue classics and not the original, which was computer science for you? Was computer science your first, I guess, sort of introduction into the whole digital landscape?
So I'd been kind of self-taught in terms of programming from about sort of 12, 13. And this is kind of pre-internet. So self-taught back then was you bought a big book and it had a CD on the front with the programming software and you kind of installed that. So it was something that I was really interested in. I love building things. I like being able to like turn what's in my head into something that's real. So I've been doing that for ages and I was really into it. I'm quite techie anyway. And I love understanding how networks work and things like that. But actually, I had quite a few friends, people like, and this is back in, sort of the late 90s that people had met on the internet. So it was a very different world back then. So you'd meet someone on the internet and go off and meet them in person, age 14, without anyone batting an eyelid. It'd be terrible. And some of these people are still very close friends. And one of them, Ben, so he was studying computer science in Edinburgh at the time, said, like, you shouldn't do it. You mustn't do computer science. You're a very creative person. You really don't want to go down that route. You want to do something interesting. And his take, I mean, reading between the lines on it back now, I think he was just very depressed and very unhappy about his course. But it was good. It was quite useful for me to have that sort of rectification. So I think what I was thinking is I'd go into computer science and end up doing something really creative with technology. But back then, computer science was more, you were going in to maybe build kind of mainframe systems. This was very kind of early days, I guess, for what we consider as computer science now, where you might do something more interesting. So I think he saved me a little bit, but also going in and doing classics was very interesting because the skills you use when you look at languages, particularly dead languages, weirdly, because they can be more like puzzles. You don't have to worry about being able to speak them, are very, very similar to the kind of tools that you use in your brain when you're doing programming, and particularly when you're figuring out systems. So it's like spotting parallels, being able to connect the dots. I mean, classics is just such a fun degree. I learned so much, the mix of philosophy, and I guess it taught me either a good or bad lesson, depending on how you want to take it, but not to ever narrow my focus too much. I think it's probably the degree you can go and do at university that allows you to basically still do a bunch of A levels together because you do history, you do philosophy, you do literature.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed your degree at university. Now, what was university like for you in general?
University was good. It was a 4-year degree, which is excellent. I thoroughly recommend it. I did lots of work, obviously, on my degree and stuff, but where my passion really was after the first kind of 6 months or so was I joined one of the student newspapers, or the student publishing companies, let's say, because we had a couple of different, we had a newspaper and a magazine. And there's two student publishing companies at Oxford. There's the one that's run by the union, the student union, and there's one that's run independently, and it's kind of a ragtag bunch of people. So it's been running since the 1920s. One of the publications has been running even earlier, 1865, I think. So it's lasted all this time, and it occasionally, goes semi-bankrupt, has been bailed out by people, things like that. But it's got this real sort of entrepreneurial feel to it. So I got involved weirdly, just they were looking for someone to help with the IT because they were having massive issues. I got involved with that and ended up editing the newspaper where I wrote. Very weird, really.
Oh, wow.
And then ended up sort of being involved in running that student company for ages. So I was involved in that for a long time. I'm still very good friends with lots of people I met there, and actually still involved every now and then. I go back and kind of talk to them every couple of terms. But that was amazing, and that was a real sort of social thing. But it also gave me a lot of purpose and showed me a lot of what's fun, I guess, about being in an organization, being in a company. The thing you don't get much exposure to, I suppose, at university is the sort of idea of profit and loss, having to manage cash flow and all that kind of stuff. But that's a really useful way in to see what's exciting about running and building a business. And that really kind of inspired me. And I think that's probably why I ended up being so interested to go into a small organization when I came out of uni as well.
Very interesting stuff about your time at Oxford, learning obviously for the first time that you actually did not do something more digital or computer science focused, but rather something more creative, which is great, actually. I think it's nice where you're able to pursue your hobbies and that really inspired you to pursue the current career journey that you're currently on. Now, leading on to my next question. So post Oxford, what was your first job?
So my first job was actually at Four, where I am now. So I have left in the meantime. I'm a boomerang, so I came back. But I applied to what was then Four's first ever grad scheme back in
Mm.
2006. This was, and I applied. It was advertised on the career service. I was having this sort of slightly petulant end of university experience where I was kind of, I don't know what I want to do. Like really sort of,
Mm,
which I think sound really entitled, frankly, to a lot of people who left university in less pleasant, like, after the financial crash or at different points, it's been much harder to find a job. But in
yeah,
2006, it was it was a growing market. It was a very positive market. So
yeah.
I sort of sat there and was like, I don't know what to do. And lots of my friends were going into banking and finance and law. And I thought that all sounded far, far too kind of boring and sort of standard. Although I think probably if I went back and explained to myself how salaries work, I might have been more keen to change it. But no, it was really, I went through loads of different things. I looked at journalism. I looked at lots of other careers that I felt looked creative. But what I think you kind of forget when you're a bit older and you're established in your career is just how little you know about what these roles are, what companies are like at that age.
Yeah.
So I had no real idea. Anyway, Ford's job description was really interesting, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but I think it says something like, do you want to just do a bit of everything? Come and have a look at, public affairs, comms, marketing, media, all these different things that we can do in one place. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. They also had a graduate day, so I ended up going to the first ever graduate. It was a really good vibe. I mean, we had, I guess, there were about 20 of us, all sort of really kind of exciting at that time. And Ford's offices were at Leicester Square, so right in the middle of London. So it was quite exciting. We just turned up. I was wearing this horrendous suit and I had terrible hair and like just it looked actually some of the photos met and it was awful. But it was good. It's a really good day. I mean, I literally have friends from that day who I'm still very close with. My now wife was one of the other candidates. So
Oh,
we
wow.
met. That's when I met my wife. So it was a good day overall. So that was how I started the job and I got picked. We had about 8, maybe a few more
Mm,
on the day itself, and ended up doing lots of things. I worked on clients like, they just launched Chip and Pin. This is quite a while ago. So worked for like the payments industry. We did lots of work with Barclaycard. I worked with Sony PlayStation, which is very exciting for me. I'm a big gamer, big fan of PlayStation as a brand. And then
nice.
actually ended up going out to the Middle East to sort of help set up the Abu Dhabi office really early on, which was just a great opportunity. And I think that being able to sort of being in a small organization and grabbing opportunities when they come has meant a huge amount to me over my career. I'm not sure what would have happened if I'd have been in a bigger company. I don't know whether I would have flourished quite as much. And that whole thing about not doing creative or digital, having that, which one shall I do? Shall I become a programmer or shall I become a, marketer? Um,
Yeah.
I kind of didn't have to choose by entering a smaller company because you go in and anything you can do, any of your skills will kind of be grabbed, right? People want to make use of your best skills, which certainly isn't the case in big organizations. So yeah, that was a good start.
Oh, man. I remember my grad day at 4, actually. I had to go to Primark the day before to buy black polished shoes because I did not have any shoes at that time. I mean, I had, but then I left them all back home in Hong Kong. So I was freaking out because I was like, I needed to get proper shoes and literally look my best. So I remembered, yeah, just going around Exeter. I had to take the train from Exeter to London. So it was a funny story. And I just had in my mind, I need to be memorable. I need to just do what I have to do. I don't care. So
Well,
it worked out.
I tell you, I looked a mess. I mean, 100%. One of the other people I applied to, I tell you, I applied to everything, right? I applied to all kinds of random stuff, and I applied to McKinsey. And McKinsey, very big, very sort of formal, established. I went to their office in London and I mean, it just felt so out of place. I
Hmm.
looked properly like I didn't really know how to dress myself. I mean, it's weird as well because you look back and you think none of that really matters. But
Yeah.
as soon as you get to the place, you know whether it's the kind of place or just by how they kind of look at you. And it's interesting, like talking to people who hired me at four, they were like, the guy with the hair. That's what they were saying. They were like, oh,
Oh, wow.
the hair was quite good. So it
Yep.
does lodge in people's mind, but luckily I made a good impression other ways, I guess.
That's so interesting throughout your time. Now at four. So this leads on to my next question is, what would you say, and this could apply at four or elsewhere over your career journey, what has been an important lesson you still take to this day?
I think this interesting one because I think there's a bunch of things that I've learned through my career that have helped me at various times. I was thinking more and more, particularly now, with a real change in how people find their place in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
That actually the most important thing is probably just not taking intellectual shortcuts. So and it's a bit weird to explain, I guess, but it's staying curious when you're doing something that requires a human involved, which will change right over time. So we've got AI now, which can take a lot of things that you literally actually needed a human involved, right? A lot of that work will change. But when you do have work which requires a human involvement, not then shortcutting that human involvement. So give an example, like I do lots of presentations
Yeah.
and I do lots of new business proposals and things like that. And I've always, always, always been the kind of person who, will start from scratch. And it doesn't mean sort of completely ignoring everything I've done before. I build on what I've done before. But I found that if I take any shortcuts at all, if I copy and paste things from other slides, or if I use like a bit of copy that someone else has written, then I'm cutting myself out of the process. And I think with AI, that's even more important, right? Because a lot of people
Yeah.
say don't use AI because you don't do the thinking. But actually, I think it's completely the opposite, right? The intellectual shortcut is taking the data or what you've got and putting it over there and not using your brain during that process. But if you're using AI properly, right, you are engaging your brain. You're engaging in using AI to get some answers that you can then build on to deliver what it is. Or you're filtering through, or you're applying your particular perspective, or you're applying what you know to build the prompt in the first place. So more and more, I think that's the key. I think people who take quick intellectual shortcuts, using the same stuff over again, or not taking a step back and thinking things through, or just accepting what they're given. That's the number one like career danger for me. I think because it'll be obvious that you are less useful in an AI world, but also like you just get less satisfaction from it, right? Yeah, you want to be in a position where you start a task. It doesn't have to take ages, but you've brought yourself to the task, you're delivering it, you're doing it in a way only you could do. And at the end, you're proud of it. And I think if you lose any of that, and that doesn't just apply to presentations or whatever, that could apply to programming, it apply to, doing a client meeting, whatever. Any point where you feel like you're just sort of disengaging and turning your brain off a bit, I think that's a real danger. So that would be my one. And all my advice used to be around sort of, lots of other things like, getting ahead and make yourself useful to people. I think actually that's the one thing that I would advise people now, because that's the biggest danger, I think, at the moment. People misunderstand what their role in the workplace actually is.
I feel like what you said there is very crucial to what I'm trying to work on. And that is also just to be more creative and not just my thinking. Because I feel like when you have technology and AI right here, how else could you be creative when it can give you the information you need? I had the curiosity aspect, that's over there. But I'm trying to understand now how to be more creative. So that answer you just gave, it definitely gave me an element of wonder and how to really strategically, the curiosity and creative elements together and apply this or learn to adapt. I think adaptability is the most crucial thing. And it's something I've been trying to take.
Exactly right. And I think, if you end up in a position where you're like, I've not done this before, for me, that's always been, this is exciting. I get to do it.
It's
But
scary, but it's great.
Yeah, and it should be a little bit scary, but equally, you need to be able to sort of tackle new things in your
100%.
career. And to do that, you need a few things. One, you do need the right mindset. Two, you need to have confidence in yourself and your output. And that can either be confidence that you have through experience because you've done it before, or you have to give yourself confidence. You have to use whatever psychological tips that you need to get there. And then I guess the other part of it is you need the personal connections in the workplace that that if you try something new, people won't reject it. You
Yeah.
need the credibility that you've built up, right? By showing that you can do things. So when you try and do something new, I mean, I remember when I first started at Four, right? So we did this round robin thing where we went around all the different parts of Four. So it was, comms, which is a lot of writing, a lot of media relation things came very naturally to me. And then I moved to the creative department. And I sat next to this guy called Pete, and he's a proper old school artwork. Has a million like his computer set up perfectly for him. He's using Quark Express, which is like what he's done. He's a lovely guy, but he was very dubious about the idea this random 21-year-old could do anything or do anything useful. I won him over pretty quickly because I happened to have used Quark when I did the student newspaper and stuff.
Yeah.
But like that sort of building credibility and having the confidence to do it. I mean, that was the kind of thing that I think maybe the arrogance of being in your early 20s helps, but being able to sort of move into a space where you're not the expert and embrace it is hard, but you kind of got to push through because we're all going to be doing that more, right? And the creativity point is a really, really good one. So I spend a lot of my time talking to creatives, people who have job title creative in them, or they consider themselves creatives.
Yeah.
And I just see this huge gap between the way that our industry uses the word creative, which sometimes just means like banner ads, right? Like
Yeah.
it just means, it's visual. But it doesn't mean
Exactly.
creative at all. It just means image led rather than, or sometimes it means strap lines, right? So it's Mad Men style. It's all about the concept and actual creativity, which is way harder to bottle and way harder to understand. But you know it when you see it. And that's the bit that fundamentally, that's the bit people want and people pay for. And a lot of that is being able to do non-obvious things. And that builds on all of the things I've just said. All the personal credibility is super important. If you have the most creative, exciting, best idea in the world, but no one believes you when you say it, people will just think it's not very good. Convincing yourself,
It's just down to you.
yeah. And AI accelerates that, right? Because you've got the ability to sort of brainstorm with something that isn't human. So you can do it in a low risk environment. You've also got the slight worry there that AI will tend to reinforce your beliefs. So
Yeah.
it can be really useful for building confidence. You can say, is this a good idea? And trust me, if you give anything to ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, and you say, is this a good idea? It will say yes, right? They are built to sort of agree. And that's the tendency. So it can help with that, but it can also mean that you lose even that ability to judge yourself. And you end up in this real morass of like, how do I know is something good? And when you're talking about real creativity, that's so hard because,
It is.
the most creative, interesting stuff in the world doesn't look right when you see it the first time. I mean, the classic examples like the iPhone, which I'm not sure I totally get. It's the most creative thing ever, but that's a good example, right? It doesn't look like a phone. Where are the buttons? It won't work, that kind of stuff. The confidence to push it through, the arrogance, I guess, to push it through is a big part of the puzzle of what makes a creative able to deliver creativity rather than just kind of shy away from it. So yeah, that's big part of the puzzle for sure.
Definitely. Time will tell. Now, moving on to the next question, which I want to get, of course, near the end, is more about your role, current role. But before then, I want to learn more about what inspired you to then go on this whole entrepreneurship adventure. So when did you realize then that you wanted to, step away from a bit more corporate and go into entrepreneurship? And could you please tell us more about Marmelo Digital?
Yeah. So after I was at Ford for 8 years or so, and from a grad, I ended up heading up the digital and creative team, which was relatively small back then, but we did loads of very interesting work, lots of websites, lots of advertising campaigns, things like that. It was really good, and I'd just been there, long enough, and I relatively itchy feet at the best of times, so I was quite keen to move on. And I ended up getting interviewed for a role at LLDC, London Legacy Development Corporation. They are the people that took the Olympic Park in London from its games use, so during the actual Olympics, and make it into its legacy use. So make it into a
Right.
local park for local people, and all these amazing There's the stadium is still there, like the aquatic centre, all these things are for the local community. Local community is East London, so it's large. But it's very, very exciting, very passionate about the project. And I joined that, and I think going from agency to essentially local government, although it was a very dynamic part of local government, was an enormous sort of change that I don't think I was ready for. So I went from somewhere where I had quite a lot of, agency, I guess, quite a lot of my own ability to do things and make things happen, to a situation where, there was lots of exciting stuff going on, but the decisions were being made in just at a huge remove really from where I was sitting. So I was in the essentially the communications and strategy unit, marketing and strategy unit. And we, had control over our day to day. But, this is a large organization. There's so much we can control. And I love being involved in understanding a problem, coming to the problem, being at the start, strategizing. And so being at the end of that process a couple times was tricky. And I found myself, I was juggling hundreds of plates at a time when I was an agency,
Oh, wow.
going
Yeah.
from hundreds of plates to sort of juggling no plates and having a very sort of 9 to 5 job. I didn't react very well at all. So I had a bit of a moment where I realized, well, actually, I like this agency thing and I like solving people's problems. And what I really liked, and I always knew this when I was in retail, when I was a teenager, and when I worked at the Pleasance, the Edinburgh Fringe, when I was at uni, I've always loved being able to like go into the door that says no entry. So like being able to go behind the scenes. If you're an agency, you get to do that a lot, right? You get to see lots of different organizations, how they work, be part of the solution and kind of get behind the scenes with lots of things.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I realized that I was quite keen on that. And then I thought, well, I'll take all the things I've learned from working in a great agency for the first time. A friend of mine from school, who's a developer, a very creative developer, was also starting to think, he wasn't loving his job, but that it was at, he just finished his PhD and he was at a consultancy, a tech consultancy. And so we thought, well, let's try and go on our own and do it. So we started this company, literally operating from my shed for the first year or so. Hired a couple of people, and we were really lucky. We managed to get a couple of quite decent NHS contracts very quickly,
Nice.
and a couple of local theatres and things. Got really involved with that. And so this consultancy, this Marmello, which agency we built, became a sort of targeted creative technology agency. So it wasn't just marketing. It was we did things like prototyping 3D cameras for Intel and the RSC. We did loads of work with theatre, which I really enjoyed. We worked for the NHS. I said we worked for Twitter. We did a whole piece of work where we went in as a contemporary team into Tesco and things like that. So we did loads of different things. So really, really, really good. We started that in I guess it must have been 2015, 2016. And, and went through COVID, right? And so we were building year on year. We did better every year. From a financial point of view, that was very good. We were building headcount. We hit COVID, and actually we did really well through COVID. So from a financial point of view, look at our revenues, we did great. But I think it made me realize that the fun of doing that small organization thing, being in a small company, is all the sort of interpersonal interaction and being there with people. And that kind of disappeared a bit during COVID.
Yeah.
Um, and we started to think, well, look, there's a lot of things that we're doing which are not like our core strengths, the finance side, the HR side, that kind of thing. So then we had a couple of conversations going with different people. Primarily, we got talking to my old colleagues at Four, and they were looking to sort of make an investment in this creative technology space. And so that all sort of came together. So it was really great to then come back to the family at Four.
How did it feel to come back after about 7 or 8 years later?
I mean, good, right? It felt a lot like coming home. I think one of the benefits of Four is that there is a lot of consistency, right? People don't tend to leave. Our turnover is quite low, particularly at senior level, and it's still run by all those same people who founded it. So like 20 years ago, it was nice to feel back in, and I felt like I returned in many ways. But because the industry had changed so much, it
Yeah.
didn't feel like going back to my old job, right? So COVID had happened. AI was starting to, appear on the horizon. Lots of changes in consumer behavior, lots of changing what was possible, what people bought from agencies. So it felt totally different in terms of what I was actually doing, which was great. It was the best combination. Then Four also, just after they acquired Marmello, acquired another agency, digital agency, Joyful Eye, based in Sheffield. So there's lots of onboarding and bringing those people into the fold and understanding what our strengths was, what our position was. So there was a lot to do, which was great.
Excellent. Now, What did you realize that AI had become a crucial part in your current job?
I mean, it's interesting. So depending on where you work and like what area you work in, AI has been around for quite a long time, right? So, in 2015 and 2016, I can't remember exactly what year, but while at Omelo anyway, I got some Innovate UK funding, some R&D funding, so from the government, for a project which used AI. So this was, a good few years before sort of ChatGPT on the horizon. And it was actually, it never really got off the ground. We did the prototype, but the need wasn't there to build it. But it was about using AI to make it easier to enter timesheets. And the idea is it would look at your diary and it would look at your emails and it would look at what you've done. It would say, look, I think your day was probably like this. Is that right? And then you would change it around. And it was a really small thing, but the idea is, I'm still a big fan of it. I still think we should build it one day. Is the idea that as well as helping you manage your timesheets, it would be able to sort of support your mental health. Say, like, you keep doing this thing for half an hour a day, but maybe just do the whole thing in one chunk for 2 hours on Monday. You sorted, or that you always leave this too late, or whatever, and just help you sort of manage your time. But that was all AI based. It was all there. And then I used to write a lot of code. I don't write quite so much anymore, but GitHub Copilot, which is an AI tool, I guess, it was already a couple of years before ChatGPT at the point where it could suggest things like it could complete lines of code for you. You needed to be very careful that it was understanding what you're doing, but it was really useful. And going from sort of having to remember a load of syntax in languages to being able to code in much more of a free and easy, like supportive way, I saw that, this is 2020 when it launched, but I could see very clearly that that was just would transform how coding worked. But I didn't actually necessarily clock the wider scale because I was quite focused on that creative technology part and the day to day stuff. And it took our CEO Nan basically coming to me and saying, like, we want someone to do the central role to to understand and roll out AI across the business. And as soon as she kind of said that, all of these things suddenly appeared on my horizon. I was suddenly just hit by, hold on a second, all these things that I've seen happen in this sort of specific technical area, and I've used in various forms, that could change this and this and this. And actually, if you put all those parts together, it's going to be enormous what changes here. And I think I'm quite cynical about technology. I was I'm very anti cryptocurrencies,
Yeah.
very dubious about the meta. But I mean, like, I have like 6 VR headsets. I love them, but I'm very dubious about the idea that we will move to a sort of metaverse model. So I'm generally quite, cynical. But with AI, I thought, hold on a second, this is actually just a really different way, a really big change in the way that we actually use the technology around us, right? So
Oh,
I've always been someone who, if someone goes, I'm trying to do this, and I can say, well, I can do a bit of code, I can make that work, I can automate this. And that's brilliant. I've always had that ability because I know how to code. But that changes the game. If AI comes along and democratizes that, and that's the same for all your sort of esoteric knowledge, right? All your different bits of knowledge that are in people's heads. As soon as you can break that out and start playing with being creative, even if you're not an illustrator, it just changes what's possible on this massive scale. So yeah, that was a real wake up, and that's the kind of journey I've been on with AI. But I think it's been kind of breaking through the hype to get to the actual value that's maybe the most excited about it for sure.
do you often worry about AI potentially taking over your job in the future?
I don't worry, no, not necessarily, but it will 100% take over my job. I think if my job is the same in a year's time as it is now, then something's gone wrong, right? I think it will change or make obsolete all of our jobs. I don't think it will replace humans in the sense of we will still have and need humans to do everything, but I do think the nature of what work is will change. And I'm an optimist on that side. I see it as being freeing up genuinely huge amounts of time. And actually, for me, it's not just the productivity stuff. It's this thing we were talking about earlier. We talked about creativity, about understanding what the genuine value of creativity is. Why are we trying to be creative? What do we really mean when we say that? AI makes us ask those difficult questions. I mean, if you work in agencies, what do? It makes you take a step back and go, right, just because our clients have wanted to buy this and this for the last 20 years doesn't mean they will always want that. So what are we really, really, really doing? And why do they want us? And the answers are actually really interesting, really informative because you start thinking, well, hold on a second. We always wanted to do this. And instead, we've ended up doing whatever, timesheets, status reports, whatever it might be over here. And the idea that we kind of cling to these artifacts of this sort of outmoded world rather than just being our best selves and doing all the amazing things we can do. So I'm not worried at all. I'm very positive about AI taking all of our jobs, basically. And let's find some new jobs to do.
Yeah. So one of my last few questions for you is, what would you say to someone who is looking to work in AI or use AI tools as part of their job?
Yeah, okay. So I spend loads of time talking to people who want to learn about AI and use AI. And I think there are probably three things. So the first one, which is just good advice that everyone gives, but it is good advice, which is you have to use the tools. And AI is a difficult thing to kind of explain to people in
Yeah.
theory, but once they start using it for specific things, they very quickly get it. I mean, the fact that in most cases it's packaged as a sort of chatbot style interface really helps. Like the actual practical side of using it. So if you go to ChatGPT or Copilot, whatever your organization uses, and genuinely engage with it, and don't care about whether it breaks. Like try to break it, try to use different things, try and use it on a personal level as well. But it's not just that organizational AI. It's like playing around with, image generation, video generation, all of these options, are available for free. And if you're not using your company's confidential data, right, if you're just playing around for yourself, there's no reason you can't just sign up for Gemini or whatever, which is Google's one, and try some, video analysis or whatever. Record yourself giving a presentation, upload it to Gemini and say, critique my performance. You can do that free right now. And if you're not doing those things, you just won't know. So using AI is really important. It also means that you're able to immediately understand and apply lots of the sort of responsible AI principles. So, is this ethical? Where are the biases? You're looking out for those rather than just focusing on them as tools. So that's the big advice I give. But there's another bit of advice which I think is really important, which is you won't become an AI expert. So my job, I'm paid literally full time to do AI, pretty much. I'm still probably an expert in sort of 10% of what's happening because there is just too much stuff out there, and you can go down a real rabbit hole. If you want to really focus on the latest AI models, the best one, and the benchmarks, you could spend all day caring about that stuff, but it really doesn't matter to most people. So I would say pick a thing you're interested in, pick an area, and don't worry about the fact that you don't know everything. In particular, there's thousands of tools being launched and then
Yeah.
disappearing, right, in the marketplace. And if you focus just on, oh, there's this amazing tool I've seen, you'll miss the wider trend. Even if you're just using a couple of tools to do the different things, it really doesn't matter whether they're the latest, whether they're best, whatever it might be. So I think that's the other thing. But don't worry about feeling overwhelmed. And then the last thing that I've been telling people, I don't know whether you've maybe experienced this, but when you try something out for the first time, it's quite artificial, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
with
I get what
AI
you
in
mean.
particular, if you go and sort of say, I'm going to try and use Copilot, right? Microsoft Copilot now. And you go there and you say, hello, Copilot, what can you do? You have this very artificial relationship with it. And it's very hard to translate that into something that actually really, affects your day. So my advice is like without context, AI is actually pretty useless. Right? In any case, image generation, video, and text, whatever it might be, generative AI. So the best thing you can do is actually pick the things that you already do really well and know well and focus on those. Because what most people do is they believe fully that AI can transform and replace work that other people are doing, but not their own, because their particular specialism is so complicated and special that there's no way I can do it. And everyone has this thing, right? So even experts in AI, they'll pick on one thing that they happen to love and do really well. Be like, well, AI can't do that. So some extent, because you're closer, you can see where it fails. But I would say go for that. Go for that point. Try and find ways to use AI for the things that you don't believe AI can do, if you see what I mean, and provide it with the content, give it all the learning you've got, because that's where actually the value comes. I think if you can do that, you can start really using it in interesting ways because you're understanding, you're actually engaging with the technology. So there's my 3 minutes of advice, but it changes daily. I mean, the world is changing so fast. My advice is changing pretty fast as well.
I would say great current advices so far. Yeah. Appreciate it, Luke. Now we're coming to the end of the podcast, and I have one more question for you, and that is, what are you up to nowadays?
Lots of different things. I'm focused entirely on bringing the benefits of AI to fore and to other organizations. That's basically my role. So I do a lot of working with our clients to help them use the tools that they've got and understand AI. I do lots of training, and I'm not a natural teacher, so I have to dig into myself to find the energy reserves. But that's quite fulfilling because when you get people in the right place, that can be really good. And then I do lots of increasingly more on the sort of responsible AI side, building up that organization's sort of policies, strategies, help them understand the ethical implications, legal implications of AI. So there's that side of my job. And then I'm also building products more. So building tools and things that we can use in-house. So we have a range of different like core tools that we use, co-pilots, across the business. We have some external tools that we have access to specific people or multiple people, whatever it might be, that we allow people access to what we call the difference engine, which is this idea that we all can make use of all these different tools. And then there's a bunch of specialist tools that we are building, particularly around things like search, so AI-powered search and how that works changing, and little tools around media training, persona development. So all those are little things that I'm building. That's quite nice to keep my coding skills up as well.
Amazing stuff. Seems like you're very busy, Luke. I appreciate you taking the time for this. So we're coming to the end of the podcast now. For those who would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can email me, luke.alexander@fordagency. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Luke Alexander, no underscores or anything on that. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm also lukealexander.co.uk on Blue Sky. Those are my three main channels. If you search a bit harder, you can probably hunt me down on Discord. I suspect I never deleted my live journal, but that's pretty well hidden. So
Awesome. All right, we'll add all of those details below. And for those watching right now, if you're watching it on YouTube, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and a new episode will be on very soon. Thank you, Luke, for joining us here today, and see you soon.
thanks, Manav. Good. Cheers.